Quynh Pham, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's talk a little bit about the organization, Friends of Little Saigon. Tell us about the organization. You're the executive director, but what all do you do? What's your focus?
Yeah. So the Friends of Little Saigon was really created a little bit over 10 years ago. We were really just a volunteer group. It started with some business owners that came together and a few community members that saw a really big change with Yesler Terrace, the redevelopment coming down. That was when all of like the final master plans were coming out, and um, there was a lot of advocacy from various groups, but this neighborhood really felt intense pressure from the planned redevelopment, because Yesler was the first really low income housing that a lot of our seniors and immigrant families lived in. And those families frequented the CID, specifically Little Saigon, right down the hill. And so that was when I think the neighborhood really felt great pressure to do something and to come together. And so our first project, how this name came about, was actually to build a Little Saigon Park. So it was the Friends of Little Saigon Park was what we started.
That's the one that's adjacent to the streetcar stop, right?
Yes. Yeah. It connects Jackson to King Street.
Right.
Currently, it's a parking lot that Lamb Seafood Market uses for their daily activities. But yeah, we started with just trying to come together, do some advocacy, elevate some of the concerns around the pressures of development, and then also do like a physical project that could bring the community together. But I think the more that the community folks got involved, the more challenging they saw like the politics and the lack of investment in the area. Businesses were just slowly leaving. The demographic of customers and community members were also changing so drastically. And so a couple years in was when we really realized that we need staff. We need an actual nonprofit to do this work. And actually, during the time I was still in college, so I was actually working with SCIPTA, the Seattle Chinatown-International District Preservation Development Authority, that long group. And I was kind of the Vietnamese girl that had the language capacity to talk to all these really old school businesses. And that's where I fit in, is I did a lot of organizing with the businesses, got to know them, got to know this stakeholder group and help them kind of to corral over some of the issues and advance some of the needs of the community. And as I felt like I was coming in and out of the group, I supported them as a kind of a staffer under SCIPTA, but then I left for a little bit, joined their board, and then I got recruited back to be a staff. So that's kind of my roundabout journey. But I really grew with the organization, and the work just kept growing because the challenges and the needs kept growing over time.
Let's back up a little bit. And Chinatown extended really, or the International District extended all the way down from where the train station is, all the way up to 23rd and Jackson. And when the I guess state officials decided that that neighborhood was expendable, that they could put I-5 directly through it, that cut that whole section off, and it kind of withered for a while. In fact, the community had to rally to get a street other than just Jackson under to go through the freeway, under the freeway. Otherwise, it would have been completely cut off except for Jackson Street. How did it become Little Saigon?
Yeah, thinking back, Little Saigon, it wasn't recognized until about the late 80s, early 90s as the name Little Saigon. But before that, it was just a couple of businesses that established first. But I know, looking back on our history, there was a large Japanese population. There was a lot of ownership there, but as you've seen through history, then interments and everything that displaced various communities, it was kind of left desolate. Um, and once the Vietnamese community came in around 75 and after, they were looking for an Asian community to come and kind of do business. And of course, all the Chinatowns have some type of Vietnamese business established next door. So I think right around the late 70s and 80s was when no one really wanted to be in this area, the west side of the freeway. It was just all warehouses. Even till today, you can kind of see the infrastructure wasn't really built for business. It was built for more wholesale or mechanics. We have a lot of really bad contaminated land on that side.
Yeah, there are a lot of auto shops.
Right.
Yeah. But it just kind of organically became a place of business. And slowly the Vietnamese community just grew out of that. And one of the first pho restaurants was actually Pho Bac. They opened in 82 and they're still here today. So
Well, they opened in the little boat, right? They
Yeah.
didn't have the building behind the bigger building.
yeah, they were actually a submarine shop. Because I know the family very well, and she opened it because she wanted to sell sandwiches to white people because that's what she thought they ate.
Well, they
and
do.
then,
They do.
Yeah,
They do.
and then randomly she would cook, kind of make pho and soups on the side for like specials, but then it became really popular, and so then they changed the entire concept to sell pho and Vietnamese food.
So Quynh, what about your history? Did your family, did they come here from Vietnam during the 70s? Or tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm not one of the boat people generation, which is the first and second wave. I'm so I came in 1990, but I was part of the program where they sponsored Amerasian families. So I came in, so I was only 2 years old during that time. So I was born in Vietnam, but my family was sponsored through, I believe, a church in Kent. So a white family sponsored us. And my mom is Amerasian, which is my grandma. She tries to avoid this conversation, but it was definitely an affair with an American soldier. And that's how my mom is half white, half Vietnamese. And, there's a lot of guilt and things that were happening during that time to try to help those families reunite or at least get them opportunities outside of Vietnam. So we were part of one of those programs.
Was there like a cultural stigma? I know that in
Mhm.
Korea that was true. I know in Japan it was true.
Oh, yeah. My mom always tells me these stories of how she was just treated like trash when she grew up. Because it's obvious that she's half white, and they struggled and they were discriminated against all the time. And I think that's a really strong reason why we left. But yeah, even till today, it's a very confusing identity because I think most Amerasian kids don't know their fathers.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's another show for us.
I know. Well,
To
I
do
mean, the last
this.
census, right? The fastest growing group was biracial.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
But because for once they asked the question, right?
Yeah.
Because before you had to choose, which was
Mhm.
horrible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
so let's get to the elephant in the room, right? 12th and Jackson and Little Saigon. It came to a head this summer and fall like it was crazy. I remember I was riding my bike through there and rolled up on one of the first shootings. It just happened, where a woman was carrying her little child and another person was the one who was being shot at, and it was crazy. And that just started a chain of events that had been brewing there. That corner had been problematic for a long time. Now it seems to be somewhat stable
For now.
for now. But so
Mhm.
what are your feelings about that? I mean, how did it get that way, and why? Why
Yeah.
that corner?
Good question. Was still trying to figure that out. No, I think so. Before the like the large groups that were starting to gather, that I mean, folks were just dealing drugs, or they're doing open air just sale of stolen goods. We were seeing and hearing from officers even saying that they're catching people who stole items from downtown, and they're selling it at 12th and Jackson. There were EBT transactions, all the things, every single like criminal issue and
EBT.
violence.
Can you say what EBT is, please?
Electronic benefits transfer.
Right.
So what we used to call food stamps. But now the EBT card, I believe it's more than just food. I think there's other benefits on the card. But
So
how
people were selling those, or they had stolen them, and these types of things, right?
Yeah, well, usually it's you see it around the markets, because that's how you can easily take advantage of people, is when so there's a facilitator, and then there's the EBT holder. The facilitator works with the EBT holder to either give them cash for the card, so then they can go and buy whatever products, or the facilitator goes with the EBT holder to buy products and then give them cash again. And then those products would be sold to other businesses, or they would take it for their own benefit, or whatever
Right.
that is. But there is a cash transaction.
Yeah, because
that's
they
happening.
they would discount the rate. So in
Right.
other words, so if you had cash,
Yeah.
it'd be like what, 50 cents of the dollar or something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I found 20%. They only,
20.
I mean, I would assume you would try to get at least 50%, but
Well,
they're
we're
only
dealing with
getting
Asians,
20%.
so Asians are a little bit shrewder in the business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to deal with
But
Matt, so I find that out all the time. Anytime it comes to money, I'm in deep trouble. So, but along with this, you have basically an open air drug market going on as well.
yeah.
Then violence that is on
Mhm.
top of that, as a criminal activity. I mean, you drive by there, and it was ugly.
It was
Mhm.
intense.
Yeah, very intense.
Yeah, I actually had the city attorney's office and their staffers came by, and they were just in shock. And I'm like, yeah, I see this every evening. I mean, it gets early and earlier.
Oh yeah,
Our
I would
businesses were
go by there at
closing.
6 in the morning and it would be activated.
Yeah, it was just getting out of control. And the hard thing is that folks were confusing it with encampments or tents,
Mhm.
but we were trying to clarify these are illicit activities. There's no tents here. There was one tent that popped up near, like a little bit down the block,
Near the
but
park.
yeah, but that tent was literally set up to do drug exchange.
Mhm.
There was no one living in there.
All the tents really were down toward the International District under the freeway, right?
Mhm.
Pretty much in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was a situation that no one should be a part of. It's not safe for anybody.
Why did it get conflated as being, because if you spend any time down in the CID, you knew that wasn't the reason, wasn't the encampments that was going on there.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's used for political reasons to stop sweeps, or to paint a picture to help folks understand why individuals get into like dealing drugs or using drugs. And I know that everyone has their own, background and situations that get them into these activities, but it shouldn't be okay. We shouldn't allow it to elevate to a certain level where it just impacts an entire community.
So as this became a problem, and a bigger problem, and a consistent problem, what was your organization, and what were the others that ran businesses there? What were they saying to you? What were they trying to do to get the city to deal with it? Because it seemed to be like it was there and nobody was really dealing with it at all.
Yeah, we were making emails and phone calls constantly. If our businesses were too fearful to call, we would help call. But there was only so much that we could do, and a lot of stakeholders who, like, all of the customers even come to us and say, like, what can we do? Should we just go and frequent this business? But then it was still too scary for some folks to even go and like buy a meal. So we try to just check on the businesses to make sure they're okay, but continue to elevate the issues throughout the process. And it was just falling on deaf ears at the end of the year because of the transition of the new administration. I feel like the politics really made it so hard for the old administration to take any sort of action until we got new leadership.
Yeah. You know, what was interesting is to me, and a lot of people that frequent the international district saw the navigation center that was forced into Little Saigon without hardly any input. I remember it was Mayor Murray that decided it was going to go in there. Didn't tell anyone because at the time I spoke to Council Member Harrell, and he said it was just done. They didn't even know about it. And to me, that's sort of the original sin, to just drop the navigation center into Little Saigon that was struggling already. Do you think that had some impact of feeding into what happened at 12th and Jackson?
I think there is some, but I know that, I mean, the navigation center has its own struggles. And we've tried to really build a relationship with them so that we can better understand who's there. Are they meeting their goals in terms of getting folks into services and shelter? Because that's the whole reason why they're even there. But even that, they weren't really accomplishing those goals. And then we weren't even hearing from the city, like, what's going to happen next? If they are not serving their purpose, what happens? I mean, we were really upset because I was part of some of that advocacy work, pushing against the city to challenge them, because this space was available for something that community could have used.
Yes. Yes.
And they didn't even think about that. I mean, the Friends of Little Saigon, we've been seeking property to build housing and a cultural space for years. And this could have been an opportunity to collaborate. But the city already decided what they wanted to do. So that was tough.
So as COVID hit, and obviously your businesses in Little Saigon were taking a hit, just like the businesses in the Chinatown-International District, what were you trying to do? And also, how did this type of thing that was happening with crime and the homelessness and all of that impacting the community?
I mean, a lot of it was to leverage our voices, to make sure that there was something on the city level, because at the end of it, it's really up to the city. If it's a criminal charge or if it's some violent crime, then we can't do so much. Like, we can only continue to push the issue, but it's really the city or SPD or whoever social service provider, it's down to them that needs to take action. But I think for us as a community group, we're trying to think ahead. We knew that there was going to be a lot of vacancies. We already were dealing with that before these issues came to life. But just thinking ahead about how do we look at improving the infrastructure, improving lighting, looking at preventative measures to help deter future activities like this. But it was so hard to focus on that until something was resolved and something was cleared out at this corner.
Yeah. But how about COVID? I mean, how did that impact things as well? Because how are the businesses continuing to exist? And did this really happen after COVID hit?
Yeah. COVID definitely made it really, really hard. There was just less people on the street, less visibility. So you could see criminals, let's just say that, taking advantage of the situation and having just kind of free for all to do whatever they want on our streets without people keeping an eye out or just positive activity. It was really tough. We lost a lot of businesses during the pandemic because of that. And they were also dealing with the whole digital issue. Like, our businesses had to figure out how to do delivery services and like online ordering through this. And so on top of that, it was really a tipping point. I mean, the businesses that survived through it, they're still trying to slowly recover, but there was multiple levels of challenges that we were dealing with.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I saw happening down there was the businesses versus the actual residents and then the activists. And you know, I spoke one time to Jonathan Cho, who at the time was with Como and has kind of become infamous, right, of late. Um, he typified it as a civil war, which I think was an over exaggeration. But there was some concerned by the businesses that if they would speak out about the homeless encampments, about the level of crime, the level of graffiti, that somehow their businesses would be canceled by the activists because they weren't seen as being supportive of the neighbors that had kind of moved in, the unhoused. Um, walking at night, I saw both sides. It is a humanitarian crisis, but if the businesses don't survive, the area doesn't survive. So, how did you navigate that with the activists, with the businesses, with the residents? I mean, what is that walk like?
Oh, it's a fine line. Even some of the, as I'm like talking, I'm like, oh, someone's gonna say something about what I just said. I mean, I've realized that I can't satisfy everybody. I mean, through all of this, as you said, there is compassion, and we understand that folks really do need resources and support because there's just not enough. There's not enough housing. There's not enough mental and behavioral health support. And so then they result to things like this, or they just, even shelters are not safe for some folks. They're not comfortable. And speaking on even another level of unhoused folks that have culture and language barriers, those are folks that are less seen. I don't even know how they're accessing services. And so it's really disheartening to hear the divide, because I hear from our businesses how they really do want to help and really want to understand the situation, but they're also struggling, and their livelihoods are in their business. And if they can't survive, then they could potentially be out on the streets. And it's really hard to balance the two, because they always want really strong strategies for both. Either we have a lot of activists who are anti-police and really anti-sweeps. Their approach is, I feel like, very theoretical, or they are not willing to collaborate with folks that don't have the same agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And then the businesses are, because they see this on a daily basis, and I believe they understand the issue and really do care. But the way that they talk about it is without that kind of social education.
Yeah,
They
blunt.
just don't. Yeah, they're just blunt about it. And maybe it also comes from potential privilege, because they've had access to, other economic means. So it's really hard to bridge the gap between the two. I struggle with it all the time. But I think
an example
there's
to
a
me
balance.
was businesses repeatedly have their windows broken. And then the activists would say, well, they've got insurance. But that's not how it works in the real world.
No.
You have 2 or more claims, they cancel your insurance. And then it's an expense totally out of pocket.
And it's a big expense too when you have windows broken or any type of damage to a facility of any sort. Quynh, I wanted to ask you about, you're also part of the Chinatown-International District's Public Safety Council. How do you work together with Little Saigon along with the CID? Is there a tug of war there at all, or is there some unity in how you're dealing with these issues?
I think there's definitely a lot of unity. I mean, there's obviously groups that are very strong, like Japantown or like Chinatown. That's their priority. And I mean, there's also like Vietnamese and Little Saigon needs a lot of support. But I think at the end of it, we're trying to come together to make sure that we solve some of the common goals around safety. I think the priority has always been like our families and our seniors, and how do we work towards that? Well, and our businesses is really key, because it's an entire neighborhood, and it's not just like, why fight so hard when right now I feel like the resources are so scarce.
Right.
But I mean, there's still those turf battles.
Right.
It still happens, but I really do try to like get us to a place where we have shared goals.
Do you think that the elimination of Yesler Terrace, which was one of the last public housing projects in Seattle to be taken down, that had to have hurt the housing stock and displaced people? Because I know they promised a lot of the residents that they could come back, but I don't see how, because everything is so expensive. How can you come back, to something that you can't afford? Do you think that had some real impact?
Yeah, I definitely do think so. We actually asked for what the percentage of return was with some of their residents, and it was pretty low. I mean, just to build housing, it's like several years. If people are displaced and they get comfortable somewhere else, why would they move back?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that was a huge impact, especially for the Vietnamese community, because we had a lot of seniors and low income folks that frequent this neighborhood. And then we also had a major church that was just right outside of Little Saigon, in between Yesler and our neighborhood. And that church had to relocate because all of their congregation were moving south. And that also had a huge impact, because I mean, on the weekends, they would go to church, go to lunch and dinner and go shopping all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, folks are not moving back.
So moving forward, it seems there's a lot of housing stock being built in Little Saigon, not on Jackson, but on the other streets, Weller, Lane, King Street. How is that changing the neighborhood? Who's moving into those areas? And what do you think the future holds for that?
Yeah, it's a big question mark for us. Right now, all of the affordable housing, I mean, they're affordable, but they're also like studios and one bedrooms. And who lives in studios and one bedrooms? Like single people, not families.
Not families, yeah.
Young people.
Yeah, a lot of young people. I mean, they're also working class and folks that could be a really great part of the community, but they're coming from all over the place. And we just are not clear what the future holds. It's really hard to work with the buildings because property management keeps changing. I think a lot of the buildings open like a year or two before COVID, and some of them opened during COVID. And I don't think that the units have filled up. And so they've struggled to fill their capacity. But yeah, a lot of young people, we push for, I don't know if you heard about the community preference policy that some of our community groups have really pushed the city and especially the Office of Housing to institute. But right now it's still just a recommendation.
And what is the policy?
So the community preference policy is really a tool that is used to help neighborhoods and community groups that have like, especially like the Black community who are displaced and used to own property or used to live in the neighborhood. New development, if we were to institute the community preference, then buildings would then market or really prioritize the Black community to live in that building. So for the CID, it would help to bring back or recruit or target the Asian American community to live in these buildings. So it's like an added layer to affirmative marketing. But it has to do with more of your tie or your roots to the community.
So in February, I believe, the new administration, the Harrell administration, started really cracking down on kind of the homeless areas and the violence and the crime that was happening around 12th and Jackson and in other parts of downtown. They started this effort called Operation New Day. How has that helped? Has it stayed stable? Is that area a concern, or can you go down there now and not worry about there being this market of drug activity and crime?
Yes, it has helped. It's definitely cleared out the corner of 12th and Jackson, and so far they have been able to have a consistent presence there. I mean, SPD had a mobile precinct that would just park there all day, just to kind of have that presence there and break some of the patterns. And it's helped. We're now coming up on, I think, like 3 months. And that corner has been cleared. However, the activities have moved down a block. So I think that's the problem is
it as bad as it was before?
Not as bad. No. It's more of just like a couple pockets here and there. But some of the issues are still lingering around and they're just kind of moving around the neighborhood. I mean, they also moved into other neighborhoods, like Pioneer Square is experiencing an uptick of some of those activities. So although it's great right now, I think the question is long term, what does that look like? And are they going to be able to keep up this consistent presence or consistent resource?
Now, the mayor, the city attorney, the new city attorney, and I think other political types all came down there, were part of the volunteer efforts. Are you doing that monthly now, where you do this cleanup?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Actually, I was part of a press conference this morning where the mayor announced the one Seattle Day of Service on the 21st of May. But that one's more citywide. So our monthly cleanups really came out of community effort of trying to take action. So that has really helped to bring folks together. And I mean, it's also an opportunity for electeds just to come and show support.
Yeah.
And that's helped elevate some of our issues. So
except some of the electeds don't ever show up.
Yeah.
Well,
or they show up once for, a photo op.
Right. The optic
So
part
if
of
people
it.
wanted to get involved, like on a regular basis, how would they do that?
The monthly cleanups is a great opportunity to do that. And then, I mean, we operate a community space, the Little Saigon Creative. It's where our office is. And then we have a subtenant, Hello Am Coffee. So they operate out of that. Yeah. Great
Actually,
coffee.
we did a little work there, right, Matt?
Isn't that's right.
That's
we did
right.
The Uncle Bob.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. The kind of the launch, the groundbreaking. And I hosted part of that, and Matt was behind the scenes making a mess. But other than that, no.
Drinking coffee.
There you go, drinking coffee. That's right. Yeah. But tell us, what do you need?
Oh, man. So many things. I mean, it's really the continued advocacy and work. I don't think we could have gotten the action or the visibility without our neighbors and our partners and folks really caring about this neighborhood and the future of the Chinatown ID. And so that continued collaboration and effort to just elevate the issues and tell the stories has been really critical. And then come out to our events. I mean, we want to see this neighborhood come back to life. And a part of that is to get people back into the neighborhood, enjoying events, frequenting the businesses. I think that's really key, is really having that pedestrian presence again.
Getting the traffic back so that the businesses can thrive a bit, and then just showing people. I mean, let's face it, it's such an important part of the city of Seattle and its history and really just, when people come to this city to go and be a part of that, to have it not get the support it needs. Under this new administration, I guess, how do you feel so far they have responded?
I'm really hopeful. I think, and I feel like that also comes with the baggage and kind of the feelings of how the last administration ended things. We felt complete neglect at the end of last year. And so to get the attention and have started to build these relationships really early on in the year, it feels really good to have that focus. I just hope that we can continue to maintain it. Yeah.
I just hope that people join together. I mean, there was a period of time that was as devastating in the history of the International District, and that was sort of the late 70s, when the kingdom was being built
And the
and
fight for housing
and the fight for
and
housing.
for, yeah.
And Uncle Bob, who was down there, unify people. I think we need sort of that effort where people all want the same thing. They may want it differently, but they all want the same thing, and not to cancel each other and be strident about what there's, because the needs of the International District are similar, but they're very different than Black Lives Matters. And so because the equity and social justice that needs to happen in the International District is very different. The end point is the same, but how we get there is different.
I mean, we can all be called Asian, but oh my God, how many Asian countries are there? So many.
Yeah, right.
We all have different perspectives.
Yeah, but I think we have learned from history here, particularly with the Gang of Four and Uncle Bob, as well as Roberto Maestas and Larry Gossett and Bernie Whitebear, that working together, if you have that unity, you can get a lot more done than if you're all going in separate directions. So that, I guess, is what are your biggest challenges. Before we go, any last things that you want to say that you want people to think about, and as we try to get back to in these challenging times? Let's face it, they continue.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just hopeful. I think the situation right now, even though some of the major crimes and violence has cleared out, it still feels like a ghost town. I think, like downtown.
Right.
It's just been quiet, and I'm really looking forward to the day where we can come back again. And I hope that people see that future, and it's not just me. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your leadership and your youthful energy, because that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for your work, and keep it up. And if there's anything we can do to help you out with publicity, or just let people know about what's going on, and I think some history lessons here that would be helpful, hey, let us know. All right.
I will.
Okay, Quynh Pham, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.